You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. We'll get a thought on all the games in the Southeastern Conference here in about a dozen minutes or so. I'll get you a final LSU Vanderbilt prediction as well. Big news with Bryce Underwood flipping from LSU to Michigan. Want to get the national reaction. Our buddy Sam Spiegelman, national recruiting analyst for Rivals, good enough to jump aboard and get him on Twitter, X, at Sam Spiegs. How are you, man?
What's going on, man?
Oh, well, what a day to ask that question. Let's just start with the obvious one, which is, okay, you learned of the flip yesterday, I would assume when all of us did. What was your reaction?
I was pretty surprised. A lot of the reporting that I had done personally pointed in the arrow direction that LSU was going to hold on to Bryce Underwood. He was on campus a couple of weeks ago, and the buzz that I got coming out of that visit was that he's going to be a Tiger. He's going to sign on the dotted lines. And to our knowledge, he had not made any visits to Ann Arbor, at least not publicly. And things were pointing up for BK and Joe Sloan and Bryce Underwood to step in and compete for that quarterback job when he steps foot on campus. We were obviously all privy to the reporting about Michigan's NIL package. And if you're paying attention to college football recruiting, then you were aware that these very sizable NIL packages are thrown out for certain recruits at certain positions. Bryce Underwood being arguably the number one player, number one quarterback, the most premium position. When you hear about that kind of NIL offer being thrown around compared to some of these other five-star quarterbacks in years past, it's one of, if not the biggest number that I've heard thrown around for a high school quarterback. And, not surprised. I've seen kids jump at it, and who can blame them?
Completely. I know the number that we were told here was the package for Underwood got to $12 million, which, of course, a week ago there was the reports of 10.5. I mean, at some point it's enough that you say, okay, of course you do. So, Sam, was this, as best you could tell now in the last 24 hours, was this all about the money? Or did other factors creep in the 2 weeks since Bryce was here for the Alabama game?
It's hard to discount that Sharon Moore is a young coach with a lot of energy, recruiting a kid that lives 30 minutes outside of Ann Arbor. We've seen this story play out a lot in Baton Rouge the other way, and at the end of the day, a good chunk of kids do love the idea of staying home and playing for their home state team, and especially when you're that close to campus, you feel the energy of that program. And they did just win a national championship not too long ago. Not to mention they have a young coach of color as their head coach leading them, and Bryce Underwood happens to also be a young kid of color and might like the opportunity to play for a coach like Sharon Moore, who, talking to kids in Louisiana, really love the energy that he brings to recruiting, that he brings to football. But I can tell you that the relationships that Bryce had at LSU with Joe Sloan, with Cortez Hankton, with Frank Wilson, with Brian Kelly, with so many members of that coaching staff, it's hard not to point to those being equally, if not at least heading into these final weeks. Obviously, when you have an NIL package being as lucrative as that being a factor, maybe relationships to just take a little bit of a back seat. You have to imagine that had to come into play when you talked about the relationships that he had with Sloan. I mean, he's visited Baton Rouge maybe 5 or 6 times since he committed in January. That's more than you hear about with kids from Belleville, Michigan, coming down to little old Baton Rouge when they're the number one quarterback in the country. They're doing that for a reason. They're doing that to get used to the culture, the community around there. And as far as we were concerned up until a couple of days ago, he really saw himself playing in that atmosphere.
What are the national dominoes, Sam, with Bryce flipping to LSU? What dominoes fall next?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I can tell you this: there's all of a sudden LSU joins Oklahoma, Texas A&M, as major SEC programs in the hunt for quarterbacks. We saw yesterday Julian Lewis flip to Colorado. Lincoln Riley had a quarterback from California follow suit soon after. But Georgia is still in search for a second quarterback in this cycle. LSU is going to do its homework and try to get on a quarterback fast. There's not too many uncommitted kids, so Joe Sloan's either doing his homework right now or going to be hitting the portal. But what this does is LSU also is one of the few teams that doesn't have a 2026 quarterback on board yet. A lot of programs are already ahead of that. With Bryce Underwood, that definitely intimidated a lot of 2026 quarterbacks. Now, without Bryce, if they are unable to sign a quarterback late, which, again, is I think Oklahoma has a local kid in mind. Georgia as well has a local kid in mind. I'm not sure if LSU does in its backyard. That's on Joe. But it leaves a possibility that they're going to have to get their homework done on the portal and see who's going to become available.
A couple more minutes here with Sam Spiegelman, national recruiting analyst for Rivals. You can get him on Twitter at Sam Spiegs. There's also this sort of concern, Sam, about the Pied Piper effect. Underwood going to Michigan. Could he take other players in this LSU class with him? Who do you think that's possible? And if so, who are the most likely candidates?
It's very possible. First, you have to look out of state. Derek Meadows is a big win that Cortez Hankton got over the summer. Alabama and Notre Dame were both very much in the mix with Derek Meadows before he committed to LSU. He even had to extend his, announcement date because it had gotten so tight between LSU and Notre Dame. And Alabama at the time slowed down because they had Caleb Cunningham committed, who just recently flipped to Lane Kiffin and those in-state Ole Miss Rebels. So now Alabama, Notre Dame, and Bryce Underwood and Michigan are involved with Derek Meadows. I think it's very unlikely he signs with LSU in a couple of days. And then the other kid we're also hearing about is Tyler Miller. He's one of Brad Davis's, gems that he found in Laurel, Mississippi. Since he committed to LSU, Mississippi State, and also Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss have been chipping away at Tyler Miller. They just pulled Devin Harper out of Shreveport. The way that this class is trending, sometimes it's hard to hold on to those blue chippers from Mississippi when the home state teams are making that push. And then you also have to keep an eye on DJ Pickett. Again, Corey Raymond has gone into parts of the country like California, Texas, and in DJ's case, Florida. But right now with LSU obviously having its struggles trying to hold together this class, DJ has made visits to Miami, which finished right behind LSU over the summer. Georgia's trying to get involved for another cornerback to close out this class. And then Cade Phillips, their four-star defensive back from Houston, is supposed to visit Texas this weekend. Terry Joseph is a Louisiana guy. He's seeing some of the smoke in the water, trying to take advantage and get some kids on campus too.
LSU's got a lot of work to do here with less than 2 weeks till the early signing period to keep this class together. It'll be fascinating to see if they can. Sam Spiegelman, national recruiting analyst for Rivals. He's on Twitter at Sam Spiegs. Sam, last thing, when you look at well, actually, two more if I could. One, let me get your thoughts on Jahkeem Stewart, if I could, because Michigan did re-offer, I suppose is the way he worded it in a tweet. I know LSU people feel very confident, but when you see the type of money that that Michigan's throwing around, it's hard to imagine if they want him badly enough, Michigan doing anything but getting him.
Yeah, I don't think he'll land at Michigan. I think it's obviously very interesting, and the timing of the offer. Again, I think it's 12 days until National Signing Day. I don't think there's much time to get to Ann Arbor. It's very hard to envision someone signing with a school that they haven't, literally set foot on campus and sat down with the head coach. But I guess when you hear some of these numbers, I would probably do it. Matt, would you?
Absolutely.
They just won a national championship and they turn out first round picks on the defensive line all the time. But that's where Jahkeem is. He's back in Oregon right now. Oregon, as you know, is on a bye week this week. He already took his OV to Oregon when they beat Ohio State. That was a very live environment, and during that OV, Dan Lanning gave him a ton of attention, a ton of assurance that he's a top priority for the Ducks. We know that the Ducks are well ammunitioned with NIL to make a run at this. And then he took his OV to USC last weekend. As you saw, USC has kind of lost some steam on the recruiting trail. That's opened up some room for them to make some play for Jahkeem Stewart in the NIL spectrum, in the Aaron Henderson spectrum. He's obviously known for what he did with Aaron Donald in LA. He's a New Orleans guy who is from Carr. That's an obvious connection for Jahkeem and obviously the people in his circle. LSU is going to be around until the end. You can expect that with Frank Wilson. But right now I do think there's a gap between LSU and those two other teams in the Big Ten. He's going to head to Ohio State next weekend. I guess he will see Michigan on the field against those Buckeyes. I think at one point this offseason, Ohio State might have been the number one team. But I think as it comes down the stretch, I'm keeping an eye on USC and I'm keeping an eye on Oregon, especially with him returning to campus for this unofficial visit for a bye week where they can spend a lot of time with him.
Sam Spiegelman, national recruiting analyst for Rivals. Get him on Twitter. Make sure you follow him there at Sam Spieg. Sam, we appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Anytime, Matt. Have a good one.
You do the very same. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.